Welcome everyone to the American Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I'm a senior dream curator at DreamBank, and on behalf of the team, we're thrilled to have you with us here today. As we get started, we always like to poll the audience, and if you feel comfortable in doing so, please go ahead and share where you're tuning in from today. It's always nice to see where people are watching. And then also, for those of you who aren't familiar, I'd love to take a few moments and talk a little bit about DreamBank. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why DreamBank was created. It's an inspirational community destination and digital experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, overcome obstacles, and stay motivated. And really excited to introduce this featured speaker here today, Wendy Conrad of Your Happy Place. Wendy, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you. Please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andy. Let's get our show started here. Welcome, everyone, to Work-Life Balance is BS, the myth of multitasking and saying yes to self-care. I'm so glad that you're all able to join us live today. Let me just move my people so they're not in my way. Great. So nice to meet you. I am Wendy Conrad. I'm a work culture strategist. I'm a speaker. I'm a teacher. I'm a student and founder of Your Happy Workplace. Let's get into some presentation prep before we dig in here. As Andy mentioned, do grab a pen and paper. We'll be doing a little group writing exercise, so have that handy if you don't already. If you can, eliminate any distractions or limit them if you can. That means do not disturb your phone, close out of any other tabs you might have open from whatever device you're joining us from today. Turn off your self view, that's fatiguing for the brain. Also, be kind to your eyes. That means don't stare solidly at the screen for the entire presentation. Do take moments to look away, get up and walk around and just listen if that works for you. And also, if you have questions and comments, there will be some moments where I ask for some engagement. Although I won't be able to interact with those in real time, we will have a few minutes at the end where we can take care of questions and comments. Everybody ready? Here we go. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about work-life balance. We've all been told that work-life balance should be the goal. We are socialized to believe that work is bad and life is good, and the objective is to balance the two. But this really is an outdated and false hope that is a burden, because as we know, it's much more complicated than just those two categories, work and life. And spoiler alert, work-life balance is a myth. There's no such thing, because work and life happen at the same time, sometimes in the same place, and not at opposite ends of the scale. So there is no work-life balance. There's only life. And life is a mixture of family and friends and home and hobbies and love and relationships and work. Work is a part of life, but it's not separate or opposite from life. Life is messy, it overlaps. So trying to live up to that unrealistic ideal of constant balance, that's an exhausting hamster wheel to nowhere. Because we juggle many balls, and sometimes we drop one or two or a few, and that's okay. Because the lie of work-life balance is rooted in perfectionism. It can never be achieved. So we're over here feeling like failures because we're not achieving this thing that is not achievable. And what has been happening to all of us in the past couple of years that is further complicating things on so many levels, a global pandemic, not to mention all the other BS that's going on in our country and the world and maybe our personal lives. But the pandemic has been a huge disruption to how we work and live. our work lives and our personal lives literally had a collision. Not to mention the exhaustion and stress, constant stress of all the events the past couple of years or so with no recovery time. So with all of this going on, what do we do? Because we cannot do it all, and nor should we. The answer is not to try to do it all and not be able to succeed at that. The answer is to change the system that expects us to do it all. And until that happens, today we're going to talk a little bit about some things we can do for ourselves and for each other that might help change things. What are some of those things? Having conversations about it like we are today. We can work towards creating something different to the best of our ability and with the resources that we have available, creating energizing, supportive environments where wellness is valued and the opportunity to refuel is given. And that goes for us and the people around us. And you might say, oh, opportunities to refuel. That sounds great, Wendy, but how can we create an environment like that? 2 words, awareness and permission. Raise an electronic hand or comment in the chat and engage with the audience if you are a professional multitasker. Let's talk about that. Dave Crenshaw, who wrote the book, The Myth of Multitasking, How Doing It All Gets Nothing Done, has this to say about multitasking. The problem is there is no such thing as multitasking. As multiple studies have confirmed, true multitasking, doing more than one task at the same time, is a myth. People who think they can split their attention between multiple tasks at once aren't actually getting more done. Now, for you diehard multitaskers like me, I know this might be hard to believe because on the surface, it feels like we're doing more. We're getting more done when we multitask. It feels like we're being productive. And there's a lot of other nuances to this concept. So if you're having a hard time with this, let's do a little experiment. And this is the part where you'll get your pen and paper out. And I'm going to go to the next slide, but don't start until I give the instructions because this is a timed activity. So what we're going to do is you're going to write the sentence work-life balance is BS on one line. And then underneath it, you'll write the numbers 1 through 19. So this is what it'll look like on your paper, the sentence first, and then the numbers. I'm going to be timing as we go and calling out times as we go. So as you finish, write down how many seconds it takes you to complete this task. Don't start until I say go. Everybody ready? Set, go. 5 seconds. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20, 25 seconds, 30 seconds. Some of you might be finishing up. 35, 40 seconds. I'll give it 5 more seconds. And 45. Everybody should have had enough time to complete that. Okay, perfect. So we're going to do this one more time, but a little bit differently. So it will look the same on your paper, the sentence on one line and the numbers on the second line. But as you write, you're going to alternate between letter and number. So you'll write the letter W, you go to the line below, write the number 1. Write the letter O, go down below, number 2, R, 3, K, 4, and back and forth like so until it looks the same, but you're alternating back and forth between letter and number. Again, I'll be timing us as we go, so make sure to write down your time. Ready, set, go. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. 20. 25. 30 seconds. 35. 40 seconds. Some of you might be finishing up. 45. 50 seconds. Give it a little bit more here. 55. And 1 minute. Okay, so how did we do? Did you notice a big difference between the first trial and the second trial? And if you want to share your 2 times in the chat, I encourage you to do that. And not only notice the difference in times, but notice the quality of your handwriting between the 2 trials. Because not only does multitasking decrease the quality of what we're doing, research shows that habitually multitasking can lower our IQ, can cause permanent brain damage. That's huge, y'all. As well as being less productive, increasing errors, killing creativity, causing stress and anxiety. So now that we know that multitasking doesn't really work and it's even damaging, what do we do instead? Especially if we're habitual and professional multitaskers. The best way to retrain and protect our brains is to monotask, or do one thing at a time and be fully present with that one thing as much as we can, because there are some things we can't control and there's some things we can. So how can we foster an environment that's conducive to monotasking for ourselves and for our teams if we're a people leader? So comment in the chat if you've ever heard of flow state or ever experienced being in flow state. What does that mean? That's when we're so engaged in an activity and we're so focused that we lose track of time. We're fully present in that thing. We're in the zone. How can we encourage that kind of mental state? Tips for getting in the flow. First tip is to clear distractions. Did a little bit of this at the beginning of the presentation. Eliminate or minimize distractions or interruptions as much as you can. And that can look like putting the phone on do not disturb, turning off social media app notifications, letting your family or the team know, hey, I'm going to be busy for the next half an hour. And then the next tip, because it's not just about taking away distractions, it's about also adding calming elements. So I know for me, I like music when I work, but it has to be music that doesn't have words, because as soon as I hear lyrics, it takes me right out. Some people prefer silence. Maybe lighting a candle. I've got a candle lit in the background here, kind of encourages calm. Cleaning up your work area, having some order there before you get started. Plants, inspirational art, whatever is going to work for you, add those calming elements into the area where you're going to be working. And then make a list and recreate. When was the last time you remember being in flow state? Can you remember what conditions put you in flow state? What was the environment like? And then make a list of those things and try and recreate those as best you can. Get creative. And of course, enjoy and have fun. So now that we're in flow, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about refueling and self-care, because we can't do the things without the fuel. And the first piece of this puzzle is to give yourself permission to refuel in whatever way that works best for you. And it doesn't have to be what somebody on Instagram or TikTok influencer is doing, although that may be your thing. But we need to discover and find out what refuels us as individuals, because it is not a one size fits all. And we need to know what those things are in order to give ourselves permission for those things. And I'm sure we could all make a list, maybe it's a long one, of things that drain our energy. But do you know what activities refuel and replace and replenish your energy and bring you joy? What does that list look like? And how would it feel to incorporate some of those things into your workday? Would your inner boss resist that? And we're going to be talking more about inner boss in a few minutes. That's where the permission comes in. So your things that might be on your list are prioritizing rest. And I want to mention that rest does not just mean sleep. And if you want to learn more about that, there's a great TED article about the 7 types of rest by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith that talks about the 7 different types of rest that we need. Meditation or mindfulness. And I think a lot of times people get intimidated when they hear the word meditate. They think sitting in a room for hours in lotus position, chanting. And if you can't do that, then you can't meditate. Meditation or mindfulness can mean just taking 2, 3, 5 minutes to yourself to just focus on your breath. That's a form of meditation. And if y'all know me, y'all know I love dance breaks. I encourage dance at all times. I encourage play. For me, I like to get into some Play-Doh. I like hula hooping. Cross stitching is something I've got into recently that's very meditative for me. Eat, and not just eat healthier, but maybe it's just to eat, period. Sometimes we might get in, I don't want to break for lunch because I'm in this groove, but we do need to eat. And movement. And I'm avoiding the word exercise here because movement can just mean getting up from your desk periodically throughout your workday. Movement can mean just walking around the house or walking around the block or playing with your dog. It doesn't have to mean we're training for a marathon over here. Although if you're doing that, high fives all around if you're training for a marathon. The point is, it's not one size fits all. So find out what works best for you and do that. Give yourself permission for that. Because your refueling isn't going to look like someone else's refueling. And also, don't beat yourself up for being human when your self-care practice is imperfect, because it will be. So, why don't we practice self-care? Why aren't we taking better care of ourselves? Why is it a challenge to give ourselves permission in the first place? I have some thoughts. Burnout culture, workaholism, toxic productivity, whatever phrase you want to use. Urban Dictionary defines it as the glorification of working very long hours in hopes of reaching one's professional goals while having a disregard for their health and relationships with loved ones. Sounding familiar to anyone? So not only that, work, but also the idea that taking a break, doing the opposite, getting some rest, means that we're weak or we're lazy. And our brains are becoming so accustomed to this expectation and constant state of productivity that when we do decide to rest or take a break, that's a change, that's something different, and our brains resist, because our brains will always favor the familiar, even when it's something that's bad for us. Now, I want to clarify here, don't confuse burnout culture with a healthy work ethic, because people can be hard workers and also know when it's time to ask for help, know when it's time to refuel or take a break. So, how does burnout culture relate to our own self-care? Think about this. How is your inner boss talking to your inner employee? And that inner conversation happens whether you work for yourself or not. Is vacation a bad word inside your head? You want to take how many days off for vacation? Who do you think you are? Let me get my pointer out. Who do you think you are? A Kardashian? One day is fine. And by the way, don't forget your laptop. Or maybe your inner boss says, you want to take a what? A nap in the middle of the day? Don't you know nappers never win? So being aware of this inner voice and resistance in our brain is the first step to acting anyway. Do you think cave people engaged in burnout culture, rise and grind? No. For 90% of human history, we would do what we needed to survive, hunted, gathered, whatever, and then used the remaining time for rest and play. And anthropologists estimate we worked about 15 to 20 hours a week, then used the rest of the time for leisure. So burnout culture is relatively new. It's a new way of being that is counter to our actual biology. So no wonder we're all exhausted. And yes, we do exist in this present day society and economic system, but we don't have to adapt to these thoughts to be successful. And we don't have to beat ourselves up for being human. We do need rest, play, leisure, refueling. And we, as individuals, can redefine what success looks like for us. And it will be different for all of us. So speaking of burnout culture and self-care, sometimes we're using burnout culture in our self-care practices, making it kind of a transactional thing. What does that look like? If I work for X amount of hours, then I'll reward myself with some rest or play or joy. Or if I rest for this long, then I'll be able to be more productive and work for X more hours. That's not effective rest. And this leads to the next reason why we might be ignoring self-care: guilt. Guilt for making ourselves a priority, feeling like we don't deserve it, feeling like it needs to be earned. I'd love for you to engage in the chat and answer this question. When was the last time you did nothing? Or you did something just for the sake of it with no objective in mind? Can you remember the last time you did that? And how did that make you feel? Were you resisting it? Because a lot of the times we feel guilt if we're not producing, and sometimes we feel guilt when our self-care practice is not Instagram worthy, whatever that means. So reminder, rest, play, joy, these are not things that are to be earned. They are things we need to engage in for our overall health. So let's talk a minute about self-worth, because if we are waiting to build up our self-love muscle before creating self-care habits, we might be waiting a little bit. Casey Davis, who is a licensed professional counselor, and she runs the Instagram, speaking of Instagram, account Struggle Care. had this to say about self-care. We tend to think caring about ourselves is a necessary prerequisite for caring for ourselves. But what if I told you it's often the other way around? Gentle steps in caring for self is sometimes the best way to begin caring about yourself. So kind of like reverse engineering it. That was a game changer for me to hear self-worth and self-love and self-care reframed like that. And also remember, self-care doesn't always feel good or easy or comfortable. It can be challenging and also good for us. So asking for help may be uncomfortable, but it's an act of self-care. Therapy, setting boundaries, saying no to things, taking a break from the news, limiting someone's access to you. Sometimes it means saying no to yourself, or sometimes it means saying yes to yourself. And self-care shouldn't just be limited to weekends or your days off or special occasions. We need to intentionally build it into our daily routines and into our workplaces. So think about it as incorporating pockets of refueling throughout your day. My last tip for being successful at self-care is to take a community approach to it versus an individual approach, because I think we're taught as individuals that we are the problem and we are the solution. So what does a community approach look like? Having conversations about struggling, normalize asking for help, checking in with your community, ask what the folks in your life are doing or not doing for self-care. Because we all have communities, whether that's with our friends, our family, our chosen family, neighbors, the work team, another group you might belong to. We all have humans in our lives that probably have some of the same challenges and struggles we do. So we're not alone. As I wrap it up today, I invite you to stand with me because movement stimulates the brain, and you can certainly do this seated as well. And if you're going to do that, I just ask you to wiggle around and wake up a little bit here. We're going to take a self-care pledge. So raise your right hand and repeat after me. I give myself permission to take a break when I need it and to not feel guilty about it. From this day forward, I will say yes to rest and play and commit to my self-care practice. Woo! Deep breath. How did that feel to say out loud? You may be seated if you were standing, and in closing, I have a couple of quotes that I wanted to share. The first is by Betsy Jacobson. She's a sociologist, writer, and has her master's in business and organization. And she says that balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. Balance means making choices and enjoying those choices. Whew. The last quote is by Layla Delia, and I apologize, Layla, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. She is a writer and wellness educator, and she says self-care is how you take your power back. So let's claim our power. Think about a world where we are all taking better care of ourselves and supporting those around us to do the same. Think about what impact we could have when we are better managers of our physical and mental energy. What kind of coworkers would we be? What kind of leaders would we be? What kind of parents, teachers, activists, change makers would we be? So it's time to claim our power, to say yes to rest and play and asking for help. Say yes to ourselves. Thank you so much for attending live today. And those of you watching it in the replay, I'd love to hear what you take back to your workplaces and communities and personal lives to strengthen your self-care practices. Do come find me on all the socials. I'm out there. I also have a new podcast called the Internal Customer Handbook Podcast, available on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple, with a new bonus series called History's Horrible Bosses. It's as good as it sounds. Thank you so much to Andy and the DreamBank community for letting me come and share this time with you. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to stop share if we have questions or comments. Andy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Wendy. It's always a pleasure getting to hear you, shed some knowledge. And if you, the viewers who are watching today, if you hadn't realized yet, Wendy's a bit of a gift goddess. I have found some of Wendy's gifts in the corners of the internet that I wouldn't otherwise expect. So keep an eye out for those as well too. That's always been fun. But yeah, at this time, I'll turn it over to the viewers here for any sort of questions that you may have for Wendy. Wendy, while we wait a few minutes for people to type those up or to come off mute, we are a community that is built of fellow fearless streamers here at DreamBank, and we always like to ask our speakers, what is one piece of advice you have for someone who's actively pursuing a dream right now?
I would say the biggest is to give yourself permission for the dream. I think sometimes, I speak from personal experience, we don't allow ourselves to dream the big dream. We might have the medium dream, but I mean, I know some people might not believe this, but I turned 50 this year, and that just reminded me that we don't live forever. We don't have unlimited time. Allow yourself and give yourself permission for the big dream, and take little steps every day. It's not going to happen overnight, maybe, towards that big dream.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. It doesn't look like there's any questions that have come in yet. I can pause here for a few moments, though, if anybody wants to come off of mute and ask Wendy a question.
I want to address a comment that I see here in the chat that I noticed in response to my question, when is the last time you did nothing? And Kendall says, the last time I did nothing. Geez, I can't really think. Mom guilt is so real. I think to address these kinds of things in terms of our experience as women and as moms, that's a whole nother level of guilt, a different kind of guilt. And Andy, you as a new parent may experience that level of guilt too. So I thank you, Kendall, for adding that perspective, because that's something that is very much real.
Absolutely. So yeah, as we wrap up here, if you enjoyed what the session today, this is being recorded and will be aired on our YouTube page. Just search DreamBank YouTube, and it'll be the first one that pops up for you. And then that also houses a pretty extensive library of pretty much every event that we have done since the end of March of 2020. So we're continuing to put new content on there every week as well. So keep an eye out for that. But with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Wendy. We'll cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.